Welcome to the 2012 Association of the United States Army Annual Convention. This year's theme is the Army Learning Model for 2015. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, General Robert W. Cohn, Commanding General of the United States Army Training and Doctrine Command. But before General Cohn comes forward, I want to give a brief background on one of the tenets of the Army Learning Model. Emerging technologies are likely to have the greatest effect on the soldier learning environment in the next 5 years. Games for Learning is one such emerging technology. What do you see and hear? Do you hear some annoying, mind-bending distraction? Do you see someone idling away their time? I hope to answer that question in the next few minutes. Good ideas don't always take off immediately. Just as the printing press took nearly 50 years to be adopted, Games for Learning is in its infancy. It is for that reason that there doesn't seem to be consensus in the field for defining games for learning. Simulations have been defined by some as representations of some real-world phenomenon or imitation of some system, process, or environment. Games, on the other hand, do not represent any real-world phenomenon or system. The game is the end in itself. The terms game and simulation are sometimes used interchangeably, but the key distinction between the two is that simulations propose to represent reality, whereas games do not. Games for Learning can be broadly grouped into 3 categories: games that are not digital, games that are digital but not collaborative, and collaborative digital games. The usefulness and effectiveness of Games for Learning is not yet fully understood or appreciated, and is still very much in a fluid and changing state. Proponents and advocates alike are very vocal as to the potential, or lack of potential, for using games in education and to complement e-learning. The 2011 edition of the Horizon Report tells us that proponents of game-based learning for higher education point to its role in supporting collaboration, problem-solving, and communication, the 21st century competencies needed by American students outlined by Secretary of Education Arne Duncan in late 2010 in the National Education Technology Plan. Nearly a decade of conflict has shown the Army that it is extraordinarily difficult to prepare soldiers for every battlefield contingency. Instead, soldiers and leaders must master a set of critical core competencies that provide a foundation for operational adaptability. Games for Learning are in keeping with many of the 21st century soldier competencies called for in the Army Learning Model for 2015, which are very similar to the 21st century competencies needed by American students. In her analysis of the game The Lean Lemonade Tycoon, Lisa Nacum tells us that the interest in simulations and games by educators has been on the rise in recent years for primarily one reason, and that is the shift away from teacher-centered, lecture-based instruction to more learner-centered methods of instruction. This is in keeping with one of the objectives of the Army Learning Model, which is to convert most classroom experiences into collaborative, problem-solving events led by facilitators, vice instructors, who engage learners to think and understand the relevance and context of what they learn. Games for Learning is not without its detractors. Pablo Morano Guerre, a researcher from the University of Madrid in Spain, tells us that there are some challenges to using Games for Learning. One challenge is that there is a reluctance among some teachers to adopt new educational technology because of a fear of being replaced by the technology, and others don't want to find out that they know less about the topic than their students. Another challenge is cost. In a recent survey of game developers, it was reported that 25% of games developed cost between $100,000 and $500,000, and another 15% cost between $1 and $10 million. The reluctance of some educators to embrace Games for Learning is based solely on the social perceptions of games. some are only familiar with the most violent of games, those games that challenge the player to shoot more, steal more, and crash more. According to Hong and Cheng, some games have little educational value, not because they are games, but because they lack pedagogical design and game-based learning principles. Academics, researchers, and industry leaders alike tout the potential of game-based learning. Interest in games for learning has grown as research continues to demonstrate its effectiveness. For these reasons, the U.S. Army Learning Model for 2015 will advocate the use of pedagogically sound games based in solid learning principles. I ask again, what do you see and hear? Do you hear some annoying, mind-bending distraction? I don't. I see and hear game-based learning in action. Ladies and gentlemen, without further delay, I introduce to you General Robert Cohn.